Hello everyone, I'm Chase at Rocky Mountain ATV and this is our overview of the Yamaha TT-R50E. All right, so we all know there's a lot of great bikes out there that are great for youth riders, riders that are just starting out, for women, or even for adult riders that just want a little play bike. And today we're gonna go through, we're gonna give you an overview and talk about the TT-R50E coming from Yamaha. The great thing about Yamaha is they have a lot of smaller bikes in their lineup. Now, right off the bat, I know being a 50cc engine that a lot of people will compare the TT-R50E to the PW50, but I just want to point out there's some differences between the two, and we're going to cover those. But the biggest difference is going to be with your seat height. The TT-R50E actually sits at just over 3 inches taller than the PW50. And so what's great about the TT-R50E is it really does a great job of bridging the gap from a PW50, which is really for your smallest riders, about 3 to 5 years old, riders that are just starting out, and it bridges that gap until they get up to something like a 110. So we're gonna go through, we're gonna talk about the bike, give a little bit of background history, we'll talk about the specs of it, we'll talk about sizing, and then we're just gonna go through, give you some tips and tricks and help you get the most out of these bikes. So to get started, I'll give you a little background history. They started making the 50E back in 2006. They still make them currently in 2018. Nice thing about that is it makes it easy to find parts. Parts are inexpensive. In fact, at Rocky Mountain, we carry OEM parts for these as well. And full retail, you're gonna be about $1,500. If you don't wanna pay full retail, if you take some time, you can look online. You can typically find these in good shape for a pretty good price. So if you want to, you can look around, try and find a used one. But with these, we talked about engine specs. So it's a 49cc air-cooled 4-stroke engine. That's another big difference. The PW50 is a 2-stroke engine. But being 49cc, very easy to ride, great bike for kids to learn to ride on. And also one thing that I do like about these is that with a lot of smaller bikes like this one, you actually do have a throttle adjustment screw that comes included. So if you want to, it's actually just inside the throttle housing. So if you have a rider that's just starting out, maybe not that comfortable yet, you can actually use this. And it just makes it to where when they're starting to ride the bike, they can't open the throttle up all the way. So if that little junior rider gets a little too excited, they want to just open it wide open, this will prevent that from happening. So just gonna make it a little bit safer. Now also, big difference here, you're gonna be a 3-speed mesh automatic clutch with the 50E, whereas the PW50 is a fully automatic. So what that means is that you have 3 gears, you're still gonna shift, but you're not gonna have a clutch lever. So it's a great transition bike from a fully auto bike like the PW50 until you get into a fully manual bike. So all the way down is gonna be neutral, then you're gonna be up 3 gears from there. Now this bike is electric start only, so there is no Kickstarter, and there's a couple reasons we actually like that. One is that a lot of times youth riders struggle to kick over a bike, so you don't have to worry about that with this. And also, if you're away and you don't want Junior or the little missus to be riding the bike when you're not there, well, pretty simple, just take the key out, you're not gonna be able to start the bike. Fuel capacity is 0.8 gallons, so plenty of fuel capacity. And the last thing is with the weight. So the TT-R50E weighs 126 pounds. Now that's about 35 pounds heavier than the PW50, so another thing you'd want to consider. So those are the engine specs, that's the sizing, but now let's talk about really who this bike is for. Like I mentioned earlier, that's a question we get a lot, is what size rider is gonna be good for this? So we'll compare it to some of the other bikes in Yamaha's lineup, some of the other manufacturers, and then like I said, we'll get a couple riders in here to give you a good reference. So the seat height on the 50E is 21.9 inches. When you're comparing that to other bikes in their lineup, that's gonna be about 2.5 inches shorter than the TT-R90 and just over 3 inches shorter than the PW80. But like I mentioned earlier, it's about 3 inches taller than the PW50. If you were comparing this to the CRF50F from Honda, they're pretty much the same. They're only about not even a ½ inch difference in sizing as far as the seat height goes, so very comparable. And lastly, if you're talking about suspension, well, it's gonna have about 1.5 inches more travel than a PW50 in the front, and then about 1 inch more in the rear, and pretty much the exact same as a CRF50F. So now, like I said, let's get a couple youth riders in here, give you a good size reference and age range of what's gonna be a good fit for this bike. All right, so now we wanna show you a couple different kids, different ages, different sizes on the bike to help give you a good idea of what size rider is gonna be really good for this bike. So I've got 2 little girls here to help me out. I've got Brooklyn and her sister Natalie. Now we're gonna get Brooklyn on the bike first. So this is actually Brooklyn's bike that she's been riding for a few years now. Brooklyn is 8 years old and she's 4 feet 5 inches tall. So with Brooklyn on the bike, she stands it up upright. You can see she's got plenty of length on the bike. Her feet touch the ground very easily. And we would actually say that she's kind of outgrown this bike. So from here, she probably want to step up to something like a 110. That'll be a really good next size bike to go to. Perfect, thank you, Brooklyn. So now we've got Natalie. Natalie's the younger sister. Hop on there, Natalie. Now, Natalie is 5 years old. She's 3 feet 9 inches tall. She's a little bit smaller for a 5-year-old, but when Natalie gets on the bike, she can put one foot down pretty easily, but she's not able to get both feet on the ground at the same time. So for Natalie starting out, this bike might be a little bit big, but what's nice is that she's gonna grow into it for a few years. So as far as the age range goes, what we would recommend is for anywhere from 4 years old up to about 7 is gonna be a good age range for this exact bike. Perfect, thank you. Natalie can hop off. All right, so there you have it. There's a couple different kids, different sizes, different ages. So if you're not quite sure if your kid's gonna be a good fit for this bike, just use them as a reference. All right, so now we just wanna give you some tips and tricks to help you get the most out of these, and then we'll talk about some cosmetic things that we've done for the bike as well. So first thing we wanna cover is with the carburetor. Now, with these bikes, it's pretty typical for smaller bikes. They're definitely cold-blooded, so sometimes it can be difficult to start, take a while to warm up. So what we recommend is doing the Tusk Cold Start Jet Kit. That's gonna help it start up easier. It's also just gonna help it run better. Also, with these smaller carburetors, you gotta remember that the jets, everything inside is also really small. So if you're gonna be letting these sit for a period of time, say a few months, definitely recommend putting a fuel stabilizer in there, or you just want to drain all the fuel out of the carburetor, because if you do let these sit for too long with fuel in there, that can gum up your jets. And also just keep in mind, if you do want to rebuild the carburetor after a period of time, we do have OEM parts available that allow you to rebuild that carburetor completely. Another thing to keep in mind is that if Junior, the Little Miss, has a lot of tip overs on the left side of the bike, something you're going to notice that the air box sits right here on the left side of the bike. Now, the air box, you have a breather hose from the engine that actually goes directly into the air box. And what can happen a lot of times if you have a crash or tip over, you can actually get oil that will squirt into the air box. And the way that you can know that this has happened is you actually have this little tube that is connected to your air box right down here at the bottom. If you pull that off and you have oil inside there, that's an indicator that you have a lot of oil in your air box. So what you want to do at that point is just take the air box cover off, very simple. And then you can either just get the excess oil out of the air filter, you can clean it, or just replace it at that point, but that's just gonna ensure that the bike keeps running good. The battery in these are pretty small, and because there is no backup Kickstarter like we mentioned earlier, definitely a good idea to have a trickle charger or smart charger. That way, if the battery does die, you can recharge it. Also, if you're gonna be letting the bike sit, say over winter or something like that, having it connected to a smart charger is gonna maintain and help give better battery life, so you're not just replacing the battery every year. The last couple things we do want to point out is cosmetically with the bike, a couple things that we did just to make this better. Now overall, the bike was in great shape when it was picked up used, but we still did a couple things just to customize it and make the rider feel like it's their personal bike. So first thing, we got the ODI mini grips up here in the front. We did a full attack graphics kit for this, so you can see it's got the number on here, gives the bike a nice cool look. You can also see with the shift lever on these stock is not a folding shift lever, and most often those bend pretty easily, so it's not a bad idea. We've got the Tusk folding shift lever on here. Now they have this in the standard length or OEM length, but there also is a +1 inch, which is an inch longer. So if the rider that's gonna be on this bike does have larger feet, that +1 inch can make it a little bit easier for them to shift. And you can see we've got the Tusk polished brake lever on here. Now with brake levers, that's another item that can break pretty easily when you do have a crash or a tip over. So not a bad idea, these are inexpensive. Just to pick up a few extra, that way you have them on hand if they were to break one. Now a few more things we've added on that we want to talk to you about is we added actually just a new rear fender. Now fenders are another one of those items that can break pretty easily if they have a crash, or if an adult rider sits on the rear fender. We've actually broken those doing that before. So we have OEM fenders, so not a bad idea to have an extra set with you. Tires. Tires are really important when it comes to these smaller bikes. A lot of them, the stock tires are really thin. They puncture pretty easily. I've even heard of just a goat head puncturing the stock tires. So we've got the MX52s on here. So that's gonna help give added grip as well and traction. That's also another key feature we like about these, is that when it comes to youth riders, it's gonna give them more confidence that they feel like they have that added grip. We put a new battery in. And last thing is training wheels. If you have a youth rider that's just starting out and they're not quite confident and you want to give them some more balance, training wheels are a great option. They mount up really easily. When the rider's ready to take them off, they just come off in a few minutes and you're good to go. And there it is. That is our overview of the Yamaha TT-R50E. If you guys have any other questions, or maybe you have some insights, some tips and tricks that you have for this bike, just make sure to write those comments below. Also, don't forget that we have a lot of other great overviews on other smaller bikes from other manufacturers, including Yamaha. So if you want to see those videos, give those a watch. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's going to keep you up to date. To get any of the parts that we talked about on this bike today, it's real simple. Just click on the link at the end of this video. And don't forget that we do carry OEM parts for these as well. I'm Chase at Rocky Mountain. See you on the trails.